I'm going to say something now that probably is going to induce just a little bit of panic or at least elicit some kind of emotional response from every single person in the room. Here it is. Ready? There are only 10 days until Christmas. Now, I know that for some of us, that's different than others of us. Maybe if you're young and you're not in charge of buying gifts for somebody, maybe you're a junior high or a high school student, 10 days till Christmas really sounds awesome to you. I got a chance to eat lunch with one of our junior high students this week. He's 12 years old. And I said, "What are you excited about?" And he's like, "I'm excited about Christmas." He knew how many days were left. He knew how many times he had to go to sleep. He knew all the stuff, right? Because that's how they are. I said, "What are you looking forward to? What do you want for Christmas?" And he said, "I want an Oculus. I would love to get an Oculus. I probably won't get it, but I would love to get an Oculus." I'm like, "What? You know what an Oculus is?" I know what it is, but like I was trying to kind of work with him, trying to understand, and he's going, like, it's this and it does that and it does all this stuff. It's really a virtual reality device. It's like a glasses you put on over your eyes because regular reality isn't real enough. You need to have virtual reality. So that was interesting. So, but man, you know what's crazy is the difference between how this phrase made me feel when I was maybe 10 or 12 years old and how it makes me feel today. Now, it's not nearly as panic-stricken for me as it is for those of us who are in charge of buying gifts or in charge of putting the dinner together. But there are only 10 days left till Christmas. I don't know about you, but this makes me feel old every year. There's this season that happens sometime between the beginning of October and the end of December where it just seems like life and the calendar and time just get accelerated. And all the anticipation, all the hopes, all the future of it kind of go away. And I don't know about you, but this season is one that can be a little bit difficult. And typically in church, we call this time of year Advent. Now, real quick, how many of you either raise your hands, tell me in the comments, how many of you grew up in churches that use the word Advent? Advent is a Latin word, and Advent just means announcement. It really just means to announce or to await or to expect all of the pieces. Now, it used to be that was a church word. Advent was something you used maybe if you grew up in mainline churches or Catholic churches, or if you grew up maybe in Presbyterian churches, that kind of thing. I grew up Baptist, and so I just didn't even know that word until I was well into my 20s. But the word Advent just means expecting, announcing. It's all those things. Now, it's not just a church word anymore. Now you have Advent calendars all over the place. There are kids' Advent calendars. I noticed online this year there's a Gilmore Girls Advent calendar. My girls love to watch Gilmore Girls every fall. There's a Simpsons Advent calendar. It's 24 days of Simpsons stuff. There's even a cigar Advent calendar, and if you're looking for something to get me for Christmas, I'd be glad to text you a link. So, but there's all these things that are just kind of Advent waiting, and they count down the days one after another toward Christmas. Now, we know something about that in our culture because we're really good at the idea of announcing, really good at the idea of expecting when children come into the world. Now, I remember the very day that Marissa told Sheila and I that we were going to be grandparents. It was Father's Day. And she got me a card, and I got this card, and I opened it up and read it, and the end of it said something to the effect of, "You're going to be a great grandpa." And at first I was like, yeah, I'm getting older. And then I'm like, wait a second. Are you telling us that we're going to be grandparents, that we're not just going to deal with your problems. We're going to add another life and we get to be a part of it and celebrating it. We're really good at announcing it. Parents and new parents will post with the ultrasound picture in the front online. They'll get baby brother or big brother shirts for the other siblings. We do a good job of announcing, and then we do a great job of expecting. Now, we have something today that we didn't have when we were having kids, gender reveal parties. So somebody finds out, they seal the gender up, don't tell anybody about it, they don't even tell mom and dad. They hand it to like a third party, and then that third party, might bake a cake, and the inside is pink or blue. Or maybe you've been to them where they might, pop a balloon and the inside has a certain color of confetti, or they might do a piñata or something like that. They'll do some sort of trigger thing. Now, look, here's the deal. Marissa is married to Colin Revel, and Colin is a farmer. So they weren't doing it popping balloons. They weren't doing anything when it came to the idea of making a cake or doing any of those gender reveals. No. They loaded down a tractor, a big sprayer, and they filled it with pink dye and sprayed. We all were out there in the thing, and they kicked up the sprayer, and we found out that Emmy was going to be a girl. Super, super fun. And then comes after that. You do the announcing thing. You say, hey, we're pregnant. You do the gender reveal thing. And then eventually comes the naming piece. And the naming piece is another part of the expectation for us. We're building toward this day where we go, hey, listen, we're excited, we're anticipating, we're naming, and then mom and dad get to choose the name. Now, if you're looking for the name for a baby, here are the top 5 boy names for this year. Mateo is number 5, just around 11,000 babies named Mateo in the last year. Number 4 was Elijah. Number 3 was Oliver. Number 2 was Liam, and if you know a boy named Noah, you're the lucky winner. About a little over 19,000 babies named Noah in the last year or so. For girls, this is it. It's Charlotte coming in around 13,000. Way to go, Charlotte. Good job. Sophia, Emma, and Amelia take up 4, 3, and 2, and then winner is Olivia at around or a little bit more than 15,000 babies. Now, when you think about this is tens of thousands of babies on this list, tens of thousands of babies on this other list that are all one after another excited about a baby that's stepping into the picture. I mean, think about all these families that name their kids Charlotte or Sophia or Emma or Amelia or Olivia or Mateo. They named their babies. They were so excited. There was a day when they thought, oh, I think I feel a little different. I should take a test. And then they got excited, right? And then they started telling people. They announced it, whether it was online or in person or on a Father's Day card. And then they found out what they were having, whether it was ahead of time or in the hospital. Then they came up with one of these names, and for the rest of that child's life, they will call that child by name because names matter. In the prophetic book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah writes this story about who the coming Messiah was going to be. 700 years before the Messiah steps onto the story. 700 years before Jesus, he starts telling us about who's going to be. Now, you think you start celebrating Christmas early if you start like in October, right? No, 700 years before Jesus steps into the picture, the prophet Isaiah is told to tell us something about who's coming. He says, for unto us a child is born, a son is given, the government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called, and he gives us 4 titles. He will be called Wonderful Counselor. That's what we talked about last week, the counselor that takes the wonder and the capabilities of God and applies them to our life. The Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. He tells us these things one after another, these principled moments in our life where we go, man, that is a big deal to us. If you missed the last couple of weeks in this series, then go back and watch them. They're valuable for us because it helps us understand that Christmas is more than just a holiday. Christmas isn't just a celebration time of year. It's not just a day. It's not a dinner. It's not presents. That dinner is the smallest part of the picture because the God of heaven put on skin and stepped out of heaven, put on the limiting body of humanity and moved into the neighborhood with us, that he is our wonderful counselor and he's our mighty God. Now, if you're here today and you're going, man, I know there's a lot of things that are mighty, Like the idea is there's mighty, there's strong, there's capable, that kind of stuff. You're thinking about it. When the prophet Isaiah says that, in the King James, it doesn't say you're not given a mighty God. He's not the King of Kings. He's the mighty God. And that's what I want us, if you don't hear anything else that I say today, hear this. That the God that you're here together today, either to worship or to investigate, He isn't a mighty God. He is the mighty God. That is a clear difference. When the prophet Isaiah says it, he says he is the mighty God. He is the wonderful counselor. That definitive article makes a difference. He's defining that he's different than all the other little g gods. See, there are lots of gods in our lives, aren't there? There are lots of things that take the place or the role of God in our life. But he is the mighty God. He's the God that is above all. Look at what he says here. This is how it looks in the King James. It says, For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. Those are a big deal to us. Now, what we're going to focus our attention on today is these words right here, the mighty God. Because who God is needs to matter to us. These aren't just names that we'd say about God to get his attention. It's not like when we name a kid Mateo or Charlotte, right? Or Olivia or John or Liam, right? It's not what we're going to choose to say that will get the attention of the coming Messiah. What he's telling us about the coming Messiah is that the coming Messiah has some special and very unique characteristics about who he is. He is the wonderful counselor. He is the coming Messiah, is the mighty God. Now, what's interesting about the Hebrew language is that a lot like our words, some words have more than one meaning, but more often than is the case, there are different ways to understand the depth and the breadth of what something means. Now, here's what I do on Sundays. My job is this is kind of like a big piece, right? There's a lot here. This is kind of a full meal, if you will, right? Like, my job is to take this full meal and break it up and make it palatable for us so that we can put it on the table and really not only digest it, but we can not only inform us about it, but we can digest it and make a difference in our life. My role in this is to take the full meal and try and help break it down into places where you and I regular people can understand it in regular language. Today's one of those days where there's an amazing meal here in these three words of the mighty God. There's an amazing, valuable, super relevant and applicable thing in our lives. But the problem is we got to eat the vegetables to be able to get to that part. Now, I hate to do this to you because I'm not the guy who goes, hey, here's the original language piece. I don't always love doing that because sometimes what it does is just confuse us, or it makes it feel like I know something that you don't know. And that the reality is this is commonly available stuff. It's just not normally talked about stuff. But the Bible wasn't written in English. It was written in its native language, this particular part in Hebrew. And when he uses the mighty God, it helps us if we just understand a little bit more. And the first way we can do that is to understand one of the ways that might be understood. Now listen, here's what the Hebrew looks like. I'm not going to try and pronounce that because even if I did, I would be guessing, right? And I might make a good guess at it, but I might be like the guy who's trying to pronounce words in a language he doesn't speak and sound wrong. And the reality is it doesn't really matter. What matters is that when we translate that word into mighty God, it can mean a handful of different things. In fact, there are different ways that mighty God might be understood, and particularly this word mighty. One of the ways that we might understand the word mighty that goes into that is that he is strong, he is capable, or he is valiant. That this God, the mighty God, is the strong, the capable, the valiant God. Now, I don't know about you, but I face stuff all the time that's a little more than I really want to see, right? Or a little more than I want to face, a little more than I can really handle. And here's the thing that's interesting to me is that there are always things that we face that are like that. What's interesting to me is that the prophet Isaiah wrote these four particular kind of vantage points, or four particular things that need to be understood about the coming Messiah. And then there are four gospel writers. And four gospel writers, honestly, kind of take a little bit of, you can work through Matthew's gospel and you can work through Mark's gospel and see one of each of those kind of traits. In the Gospel of John, I think he really does an amazing job in this whole book of unfolding this big story of who the coming Messiah would be. And he says this at the very end of it. Look at what he says in John chapter 20. He says, but these, and I'll tell you what these are in a minute, are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, then that by believing you may have life in his name. It begs a question, right? He's saying, but these, what are these? The book of John, which is a gospel looking back at the prophet of Isaiah, right? And looking at the person of Jesus. And he says these things, what he does is over the course of the 21 chapters in the book of John, he takes and he outlines all seven of the miracles of Jesus. It's not all the miracles of Jesus. He just picks 7 of them. And he writes them down so that you may believe. Maybe you're here today and you're holding faith in God and church and Jesus all at arm's length. The Gospel of John has been one that people recommend, that you and I, when we're in that investigation, that discussion, that tension phase, that maybe we read that. Because those chapters unfold those particular miracles of Jesus, and they expose something. They expose something crazy about who God is, and they're written so that you might believe, so that you might have this rational understanding of what really is happening in this Messiah that showed up in the story. And he chooses those pretty carefully, right? I mean, like the feeding of the 5,000. What would you expect from the bread of life, right? That he feeds 5,000 from just a handful of loaves and fishes. Or the raising of Lazarus. He chooses to tell that story. What would you expect from someone who conquers death, except for to raise his friend from the dead? Or this healing of this man who it was at the pool of Bethesda. Like some crazy things that happen that you're like, hey, who's going to conquer all the things that are way too much for us? Here's the thing that's interesting to me. When we think about the God that is strong and mighty, the God that is mighty and valiant for us. When we think about his mighty godness as his strength, I don't know about you, but I've faced a lot of things in my life that are just more than I can handle. Really, that is a question for you. Are you facing something right now that is more than you can handle? I met with a guy, one of our guys this week, and hung out with him on the porch, and we just talked through the challenges of raising adult children. And it became real obvious in our conversation that it was way more than he and his wife could handle. They were in so far over their heads. And the reality was we started looking back and going, man, when weren't we in over our heads? When they were little, we were in over our heads. Those problems seem little now, but they weren't little then. They were huge then. They were so much more than we can handle. And here's the thing. I mean, I was just talking to him through that same kind of journey, and that's where we are as a church. I mean, it's budgeting season for us. It's the tail end of the year, and we're putting 2025's budget and planning calendar and teaching and all the things for the next phase of building and all of the stuff, right? And there are times when I look at it and I go, man, this is so much more than I can handle. But then I look back and go, wasn't it always more than I could handle? You know, there's so much of it that we can influence, right? We can control expenses on the budget, but what we can't control is income. That's up to God. That's not on us. And it's difficult to live like that. But when I recognize that the promise of the Messiah wasn't just that Jesus would show up in a manger one day and that there would be shepherds herding their fields by night and, you know, people would sing songs and we would give presents and move on to the next holiday. That Christmas is more than that. That Christmas is the mighty God stepping into my story. Let me just say this to you. If you're facing something that's bigger than you can face, bigger than you can handle, can I just say this? You're not alone. You're not alone. We're all facing stuff. It might be money things. It might be child, parenting things. It might be a relational thing. It might be business. It might be just something that's going on, tension, maybe an internal struggle for you. Maybe right now it's grief or anger or bitterness, but it's more than you can handle. Can I just say this? What Christmas really means, what the word Emmanuel really means, the God with us, is that you have you have the mighty, you have the powerful God that is on your side. Can I just say that that matters to us? And that there's more to it than that. It's not just that he's bigger than our problems and he can handle things. There's another way, another facet, another way that the word mighty, instead of just powerful, could be understood. The word mighty might be understood as champion or victor. What's crazy about translating it as the champion God or the victorious God, that's part of what mighty means, is that him being champion or victor means that he has to have won something. He has to have defeated something that was up for a contest, right? To be victorious, you have to have faced something where you could lose. And he risked it all. Well, it's amazing if you, again, back up in the Gospel of John, we see these miracles that Jesus performed, and they tell us something about who he is. In fact, the first miracle that Jesus performed was at a wedding. And the wedding had gone on like all weddings go on. They were super excited about it. And just like all wedding parties, they were in the main celebration. They brought out the wine. I'm sure you've heard this. The wine was brought out and consumed. All the good wine was gone. And they were down to just water. And Mary, Jesus' mom, was a little frantic. She wanted to see her friends have a great celebration, and they were out of wine. She didn't want to see them embarrassed. And so Jesus chooses to turn water into wine. What's crazy is this statement is when the master of the banquet tasted it, he realized that the water had turned into high quality wine. He was amazed, noting that most hosts serve the best wine first, but this wine was served later. They usually would serve the wine earlier in the story, because then while they were still sober enough to taste it. It got later in the party, they weren't really as concerned about the quality of wine, but he saved the best wine for last. Maybe there's a question for us in that. Are you facing something in your life that requires victory to be able to find joy? You see, that's what had to happen, right? Somebody had to defeat the problem. Somebody had to be victorious over the problem so that people could find joy. You know what's great to me is that I love it when Jesus heals the sick. Because there's a sick person who's set free, right? I love it when Jesus raises the dead. But what's really powerful to me is how easily we overlook that Jesus just wanted to bring joy to a bunch of partygoers. He wanted to help people experience more than just stuff, right? He didn't just heal them from their sickness so they could go on about their sick life. He didn't just raise them from the dead so that he could die again one day. Jesus didn't just turn water into regular old wine. He brought the party. And that matters. It tells us something about the character of who Jesus is. Is there something that you're facing in your life that requires victory to be able to get to joy? Maybe your struggle isn't financial, or maybe it's not interpersonal. Maybe your struggle is inside. Maybe your struggle is the grief that you feel, or the depression you're suffering through, or the seasonal affective disorder that's so prevalent this time of year. Maybe you're suffering from that vitamin D deficiency that just seems like you're constantly lacking energy. Can I just tell you this? That the victorious, mighty, powerful God that is victorious over even things that are unseen, he just wants to bring joy, and he's on your side. He cares about the things that you care about. If you care about your mental and emotional health, he cares too, and he's on your side. There's another way that we can understand the word hero, or the word mighty. It could be understood as strong or valiant or capable. It could be understood as victorious. It could be understood as hero. He is the hero God. The hero God that steps into the picture to solve and to tell an entirely different story. There's a story in one of those miracles that John chronicles. Again, he just tells these 7 stories that you might believe, right? One of them is this man who is born blind. And this man born blind comes up to Jesus and asks him for healing. He asks him to be able to see. And Jesus makes what has got to be a strange decision. It's got to be the weirdest interaction that I've seen in Scripture, right? He thinks for a second, and then he spits on the ground. Now, I spit on the ground all the time. My wife gets on to me about it all the time, but I don't play in it. Jesus kneels down and he plays in it. He pulls the spit together with the dirt around it and makes mud in his hands. That's weird enough, but then he takes this mud and he smears it on this man's face, right on his eyes. He spit on the ground, he made mud with the saliva, and he placed it on the man's eyes. And he told him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. And then the man obeyed. And when he was washed, he was able to see. You know, there's a lot of profound stuff in here. I mean, why does Jesus need to spit on the ground? That doesn't make any sense to me, right? Why does he need to make mud? Why does he need to make that and put it on his eyes? That's gross. And then he tells him to go wash it off. I don't think there's a problem there. That one makes sense to me, right? But what is the most profound, the most important piece of this entire piece, this entire miracle, is this. The man obeyed. That's the hardest part in the whole thing, right? He couldn't see him spit on the ground. He couldn't see him make mud with the saliva and place it on his eyes. But what here is implied is not just his obedience to go wash it off. He obeyed, and it was an act of faith. And as a result, he can see. Remember, we're talking about these things that are written so that you may believe. And it's all kind of heralding back to the mightiness of God that Isaiah said. And it's very similar to just a little bit later in Isaiah, or a little bit earlier, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. And on those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. We talk about folks all the time who are here today that might be holding faith or God or church, Jesus, all at arm's length. And I don't know why you're doing that. I'm not sure of your story. But I'll say this. There was a blind man who came up to Jesus. He'd been blind since birth, and he said, Jesus, would you heal me? And Jesus spits in the mud. It didn't make any sense. And he made mud with it and put it on his eyes. It didn't make any sense. And told him to go bathe in a certain place, and it didn't make any sense. None of it made any sense right up until the point where he obeyed and he saw again. Can I just say this to you? If you're here today and you're holding faith in God and church and Jesus and all this stuff at arm's length, and you're not sure why any of this makes any sense, why did Jesus have to die for me? It doesn't make any sense, does it? Right off the bat, it doesn't. When you start thinking about it, does it really make any sense that he wants me to confess my sins to him even though he already knows them? Does it really make any sense to you or to me that he expects us to believe in him or to be baptized? None of it makes any sense because there's nothing really special about those things. There is, however, something special about obedience. In the Old Testament, there's a story about a military leader. God tells him to go in. And he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to march around the city every single day and, lead with the band. Not normal, right? Leading with the band. Normally you wouldn't announce your presence in any way or let people know you were coming. But he told them to go and do that. Every single day to march around with the band and let them know that you were there. And then he said, on the seventh day, I want you to march around 7 times, and then I want you to blow horns. No sneak attack, no kind of try and, get the high ground, none of the tactical kind of genius that would go into it. He tells them to do these things that don't seem to make any sense. And they blow their horns, and some people say, hey, it was the horns reverberated off of the canyon, this or no. What happened was that God showed up when his people obeyed. There's nothing special about the horns or the band. There was something, however, special about obedience. There was nothing special about the mud on the ground. There's no special about the spit. It wasn't special about the process. What was special was the obedience. Can I just say this to you? There's nothing special about raising your hand or walking an aisle or getting baptized. This water is nothing special. Can I just say that? Like it's just water we get out of a garden hose. There is, however, something special about obedience. And here's the deal. For us to understand the mighty God is the hero God, he has to be the one that saves. For him to be a hero, he has to be one who saves. Saving is his business. Can I just say this to you? If you're here today and you're considering this whole idea of a relationship with God, can I just encourage you this? After we close here, I'll be over here by this baptistry. I'd love an opportunity to just talk to you. Nobody's going to force you into anything. Nobody's going to manipulate you or do anything. I just want to help you take your next step toward Jesus. If you're ready to make that decision, I'd love to do that. If you're not ready to move forward in that story, then maybe we can just talk about why. And if you're not really wanting to talk, or maybe you're joining us online, you could scan that QR code that's in front of you, or you could go to ourjourney.news. When you get there, you're going to see a little orange dot that's always going to be at the bottom. And it says next step. Would you click that and just say, I want to begin a relationship with Jesus? It's not a commitment. It's not a huge thing. It's just going to open up a conversation between you and me so that I can help you figure out what's next to take your next step toward Jesus, because what he was given is so much more than a name. It's not something we say to get his attention. The name, Mighty God, tells us about the character of who he is. He's strong and capable and victorious and heroic in our lives. And he can be that for you if you'll take it as more than a name.